Hello, everybody. This is Jimmy. You're reading with Jimmy. We're reading Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. This is chapter 11, Who Stole the Tarts? We left off with the trial beginning, and Alice very happy that she had read a book and could remember the players involved in the trial, judge, jurors, etc. And the Hatter was the first witness to testify when Alice had a curious sensation as he was testifying. So Jimmy wrote this note here. Just enjoy this. These next couple of pages, these next few pages of this chapter 11 are probably one of the best written sections of the book. There's really, I mean, we can analyze a lot, but part of this, I want you to enjoy the language. Remember, you're reading with Jimmy to help you understand language, which is very important to the appreciation of literature, which you don't get these days. You know, you don't get to study it, think about it, roll it over in your own mind. And that's why this next few pages, just enjoy it. So Alice had this curious sensation, which puzzled her a good deal. This is the top of page 118. Until she made out what it was. It puzzled her. We all get sensations that puzzle us until we figure it out. And when she figures it out, she was beginning to grow larger again. And she thought at first that she would get up and leave the court, but on second thoughts, she decided to remain where she was as long as there was room for her. Okay, so she's starting to grow. If you remember that part of what we were talking about, one of the great classics, Robert Louis Stevenson, is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Maybe we'll read that in the future, but if not, you can read it on your own. And it's a story about good and evil. It's great. Spencer Tracy made a great movie about it. But in that case, the drug he was taking to change himself into Jekyll and Hyde started coming upon himself. He got used to the drug and he changed into Hyde one day without taking the drug. So he had to find the antidote. It's a great story. And suddenly Alice finds herself growing larger. She didn't eat the mushroom. Nothing happened to her. She just starts growing. Now we're going to explain that in the last chapter, what's going on here. But there's a reason for this, but she is growing larger. I wish you wouldn't squeeze so, said the dormouse who was sitting next to her. I can hardly breathe. So as she's growing, she's squeezing the dormouse. She's moving in and squeezing the dormouse. I can't breathe. I can't help it, Alice said meekly. Oh, I can't help it. I'm growing. You have no right to grow here, said the dormouse. See here? Where's here? Wonderland. Don't talk nonsense, said Alice more boldly. You know you're growing too. Yes, but I grow at a reasonable pace, said the dormouse, not in that ridiculous fashion. And he got up very sulkily and crossed over to the other side of the court. He just leaves Alice. This is interesting because the word reasonable pace, that's the adjective modifying the word pace. A lot of people use this in arguments. That's not reasonable. Well, what's reasonable? What's a reasonable pace to grow? If you're in Wonderland, I don't know if there is such a thing as reasonable, right? Because everything here is not reasonable. You've seen that in chapter after chapter after chapter. Things here are absurd, they're chaotic, and yet there's a certain rhythm to this chaos, isn't there? So all this time, the queen had never left off staring at the Hatter. So the queen is still drilling her eyes at the Hatter. And just as the dormouse crossed the court, she said to one of the officers of the court, "Bring me the list of the singers in the last concert." One which the wretched Hatter trembled so that he shook off both his shoes. So he heard, "Bring me the list of singers in the last concert." on which the wretched hatter trembled so that he shook off both his shoes. Remember, he was trembling. He ate the teacup instead of the bread and butter. He's so nervous. And the queen's been looking at him all this time, penetrating him with her eyes. And she says, bring me the list of singers in the last concert. And now he's really trembling. Why? Well, Jimmy's going to guess that it has something to do with this list. Give your evidence, the king said repeatedly, angrily, or I'll have you executed, whether you are nervous or not. I'm a poor man, your majesty, the hatter began in a trembling voice. And I hadn't begun my tea, not above a week or so. And what with the bread and butter getting so thin, in the twinkling of the tea. The twinkling of what? Said the king. Well, it began with the tea, the hatter replied. Of course twinkling begins with a T, said the king. You take me for a dunce? Go on. I'm a poor man, the hatter went on. And most things twinkled after that. Only the March Hare said, I didn't. The March Hare interrupted in a great hurry. You did, said the hatter. I deny it, said the March Hare. He denies it, the king said. Leave out that part. Well, at any rate, the Dormouse said, the hatter went on, looking anxiously around to see if he, the Dormouse, would deny it too. But the Dormouse denied nothing because he was fast asleep, of course. After that, continued the hatter, I cut some more bread and butter. But what did the Dormouse say? One of the jury asked. That I can't remember, said the hatter. You must remember, remarked the king, or I'll have you executed. Jimmy wrote a note. What's this trial all about? It's absurd. It's the theater of the absurd. It precedes the absurd, which is a movement in the early 1900s, existentialism. So he's trying to give testimony about the tarts which were stolen, but I don't know where this is going. Let's see. Let's go to the next page. The miserable hatter dropped his teacup and bread and butter. Remember, he was trembling so hard he shook his shoes off, and then he went down on one knee now. He says, I'm a poor man, your majesty. This is the third time he starts out by saying, I'm a poor man. You're a very poor speaker, said the king. Here, one of the guinea pigs cheered and was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court. Parentheses, warning, warning, third person narrator, and that is a rather hard word. What's he talking about? The word suppressed. I, the narrator, will just explain to you how it was done. So it's a hard word. I'm going to just tell you how it was done. They had a large canvas bag which tied up at the mouth with strings. Into this bag, they slipped the guinea pig head first and then sat on it. That's what he's defining suppression. That's how they suppress the guinea pig. I'm glad I've seen that done, thought Alice. I've so often read in the newspapers at the end of trials there was some attempt at applause which was immediately suppressed by the officers of the court, and I never understood what it meant until now. Remember what I told you about that last paragraph being very important, her experience compared to the Wonderland experience? She now defines the word, because she's seen it with her own eyes. Suppression means putting something in a bag and sitting on it, which is a kind of suppression, if you think about it. But I don't know if that's what suppression in a courtroom means. You'll have to figure that out. But I like that definition. Suppression means just you don't want to hear about it. You're going to suppress it. There's things there's a thing called A Wild Duck by Henrik Ibsen that talks about, should you suppress the truth? Should you tell all the truth all the time? Maybe we'll read that book too. It's actually a play. If that's all you know about it, you must stand down, continued the king. I I can't go no lower, said the hatter. I'm on the floor as it is. Then you may sit down, the king replied. Go to the top of the next page. Here, the other guinea pig cheered and was suppressed. Come, that finishes the guinea pigs, thought Alice. Now we're going to get on better. Enough of this guinea pig interruption. I'd rather finish my tea, said the hatter with an anxious look at the queen, who was reading the list of singers. You may go, said the king, and the hatter hurriedly left the court, without even waiting to put his shoes on. And just take his head off outside, the queen added to one of the officers, but the hatter was out of sight before the officer could get to the door. There she goes again, right? Chop his head off, but he's gone. It's too late. Call the next witness, says the king. The next witness was the Duchess's cook. You remember her, don't you? She carried the pepper box in her hand, and Alice guessed who it was even before she got into the court by the way the people near the door began sneezing all at once. Give your evidence, said the king. Shan't, said the cook. King looked anxiously at the White Rabbit, who said in a low voice, Your Majesty must cross-examine this witness. So it's not a matter of just giving your evidence. You got to be cross-examined by the king. The king says, well, if I must, I must, with a melancholy air, and after folding his arms and frowning at the cook till his eyes were nearly out of sight, he said in a deep voice, What are tarts made of? Pepper mostly, said the cook. Treacle, said a sleepy voice behind her. Collar that dormouse, the queen shrieked out. Behead that dormouse. Turn that dormouse out of court. Suppress him. Pinch him. Off with his whiskers. For some minutes, the whole court was in a confusion, getting the dormouse turned out, and by that time they had settled down again, and the cook had disappeared. Uh-oh. So the dormouse truckle, and the queen, she's yelling, right? Shrieking. Turn him out. And by the time all the confusion dies down, the cook is gone. Never mind, said the king with an air of grave relief. Call the next witness. And he added in an undertone to the queen, really, my dear, you must cross-examine the next witness. It quite makes my forehead ache. Alice watched the White Rabbit as he fumbled over the list, feeling very curious to see the next witness would be like. For she haven't gotten much evidence yet, she said to herself, for they haven't got much evidence yet. So you can imagine her surprise when the White Rabbit read out at the top of his shrill little voice the name Alice. In this chapter, there was a lot of adventures and action characters we've met before. This is called building on character development, and still Alice is growing in experience. She's growing physically, and she's growing in experience, right? And now we are at the last chapter in our story, chapter 12, Alice's Evidence, okay? So thank you for staying with us for chapter 11, which was Who Stole the Tarts? And I don't know, the name is on trial, but we don't have a lot of evidence like Alice realized. So in that case, send me an email, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy@readingwithjimmy.com. Thank you for staying with us. Look forward to the final chapter of this beautiful story, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Thank you very much.